Spacesuits. They're not just for, keeping you alive out there in the vacuum of space anymore. Get this. The new Axiom Extravehicular Mobility Unit, Axiom-U for short, it's really pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. We're exploring the tech behind this next-gen suit, but also, why it matters for like the whole lunar exploration thing.
Okay, so Axiom Space, they're the brains behind Axiom-U, right? And they're like major players in NASA's Artemis missions. They're developing these suits specifically for the lunar South Pole. What makes it so different down there?
Oh, it's a whole other world compared to like where the Apollo missions landed.
Right.
Just imagine like extreme temperatures, right? Intense radiation. And then there's the lunar dust.
Lunar dust.
Yeah, those tiny particles, they get everywhere. And they can really mess things up.
So intense is an understatement. This is where Axiom-U comes in. It's designed to tackle all of that head on. How are they making sure astronauts are safe in that kind of demanding environment?
Redundancy. It's like essential for safety in space.
Hmm.
The Axiom-U has backup systems for like all the important functions.
Like a spare tire.
Exactly. You hope you never need it, but when you do.
I'm really glad you have it. Okay, what about communication? Are we still dealing with those staticky, Houston, we have a problem comms?
Oh, no, not anymore. Axiom-U uses 4G LTE.
Wait, really?
Yeah, so astronauts will have a way clearer connection to mission control.
Wow. That's going to be huge for, decision-making and stuff. Right?
Absolutely. Faster decision-making, more data, even like live HD video from the moon.
They'll be posting moon selfies in real time. So cool. Speaking of keeping an eye on astronauts, Axiom-U is big on health monitoring too, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Biometric monitoring is built right in. They can track heart rate, blood oxygen, even temperature, all in real time.
Wow. It's like a mobile medical lab right there in the suit. But okay, what about the basics, like breathing? How long can they explore out there?
Axiom-U's life support system can keep an astronaut going for up to 8 hours.
A full workday on the moon? They'll need those pockets for snacks and tools. Speaking of which, what other tech does it have?
Well, there's an HD camera, lights for those dark craters. It even has a suit control interface.
Wait, hold on. A suit control interface? Like what?
It's like a little spaceship dashboard right on the wrist. It gives the astronaut all the vital signs about the suit, oxygen levels, power reserves, that sort of thing.
This is blowing my mind. It's not even just about surviving up there anymore. It's about thriving. But hold on, there's also that PRADA collaboration. PRADA, the fashion brand? What's that about?
I know, right? It seems kind of wild, but PRADA's not just there for looks, although the suit does look pretty slick. They know high-performance materials, and their sewing techniques, that's super valuable in this context.
Okay, but what does PRADA know about spacesuits?
Think about what a spacesuit goes through the pressure, the crazy temperatures. PRADA understands how fabrics behave in those situations. That's essential for making a good outer layer for Axiom-U.
So how did they contribute, like specifically?
Well, they mainly worked on the white outer layer. They wanted to make sure it looked good, sure, but also that it was really functional. Oh, and they also made custom gloves.
PRADA space gloves. No, that's something I have to see. Okay, that's amazing. But let's get back to the challenges of this mission. Designing a suit for the lunar South Pole, how are they managing that?
It's multi-layered, you could say. First, that white outer layer we talked about, it's not just for looks.
Right. Gotta look good, right?
Well, the white helps deflect the sunlight, helps with temperature regulation, and then there's, the lunar dust.
I can only imagine. That stuff sounds like a nightmare.
It's a constant battle. So they've come up with special coatings, even cleaning tools to deal with it.
Like a tiny car wash for their suits. Clever.
Mm.
What about the boots? Designing boots for the moon, that's got to be a challenge.
It's one of the trickiest parts. Think about it. They need insulation for those crazy temperature swings, right?
Right.
Plus enough grip to walk on that terrain. And obviously they have to protect against punctures.
Oh, right. Sharp rocks, dust. Those boots have to do a lot. And what about just seeing where they're going? With the low sun angle at the South Pole, all those shadows?
Exactly. Visibility is a huge concern. That's where another collaboration comes in, this time with Oakley.
Oakley. Like the sunglasses. What? Yeah.
It makes sense, though, right? They're the experts in optics. They designed the visor, engineered to help the astronauts see better in low light.
So not only are they going to be safe, but they'll actually be able to see. Amazing. Okay, I want to learn more about all the tech in these suits. Let's dig in. We've been like geeking out over all these cool features, but Axiom-U, it's still being worked on, right? It's not a done deal.
Right. It's not just about, looking good on the moon. This suit, It needs to handle a lunar mission.
So it's more than making sure the seams don't come apart. What kind of pests are we talking about?
Oh, it has to handle extreme temperature, super hot and freezing cold, and radiation, of course. And that lunar dust, I'm telling you,
That dust seems to be a problem.
it gets everywhere. They're testing the materials, the seals, everything.
And, it's not just about keeping the astronauts alive, right? The suit has to let them do stuff, the science, the exploring.
Exactly. Imagine, like, even just trying to move around in a pressurized suit on the moon. The design needs to factor all that in.
Makes you really appreciate all the design details, like even where the pockets are.
Everything has a purpose. And we can't forget the psychological aspect. Astronauts, they're going to be in these suits for days, maybe weeks at a time.
It's their only protection out there.
So it can't just be functional, right? It needs to be something they can rely on that feels, somewhat normal. They need to be confident, right? Especially in such a high-pressure situation.
It's like they're home away from home. Or I guess their spacesuit away from home. But we've seen the prototypes, the PRADA collab, the whole thing. But the real test is yet to come.
The Artemis missions, those will be the ultimate test for AxiomU. They'll push it to its limits, and that's how we get data for future designs.
Which is so exciting. We're seeing spacesuit tech evolve right before our eyes. So where does Axiom leave us? What if we learned?
I think the biggest takeaway is, well, collaboration. You have these traditional aerospace companies like Axiom working with fashion houses, sunglasses companies,
That's a wild mix.
like a dream team, all coming together to make this incredible spacesuit. And all that technology, it's not going to be for just lunar missions.
So this could change things for, like, the space station or even missions to Mars.
AxiomU is a huge step forward, not just for spacesuits, but for how we think about space exploration.
It's about the bigger picture. What does it tell us about the future of space exploration?
Well, we're seeing commercial companies play a bigger and bigger role, like Axiom. They're not just support anymore, they're leading the way.
Like, it's the Wild West up there, right? And these companies are staking their claim.
Yeah, kinda. And with that, you get a different way of thinking. Efficiency, reusability, making space tech easier to get.
More sustainable, more affordable.
Exactly. Space exploration isn't just for government agencies anymore.
Which is so exciting. But there are still challenges, right? It's not going to be easy.
Of course not. AxiomU's still got to prove itself. There'll be technical issues, surprises. That's how it goes with exploration.
Like, what kinds of hurdles?
Well, it needs more testing. And not just in a lab, It's got to be tested in space. See how it does during launch, landing, the radiation, the dust?
What's the dust again?
Right. And then there's the question of how it works with the other systems, the lander, the rover, the tools.
What about the astronauts?
Of course, the human element.
Yeah.
How will they adapt to wearing it? Can they move? Are they safe?
You could have the most advanced tech, but if it doesn't work for the astronaut.
Exactly. It has to be both innovative and practical.
Correct. You've got to push the limits, but the astronaut's safety is the most important thing.
Space exploration has risks. There are always unknowns.
That's what makes it exciting. But it's important to remember that.
We should be excited about AxiomU, but also realistic. It's a long road ahead.
Okay, so challenges, sure. But AxiomU is a huge step forward. We're talking about going back to the moon in a suit that's unlike anything we've ever seen.
It shows what we can do, It's
Cool.
human ingenuity. We set our minds to something and, well, anything is possible. Who knows what's next?
Speaking of, there's something about AxiomU we haven't even touched on. Data.
Oh, right. Remember those sensors, the ones that monitor the astronauts' vital signs?
Yeah.
That's just the start.
Really?
This suit, it's like a lab on the go. All those sensors, they collect data on the moon, on how the suit's working, the astronaut's physiology.
So it's like sending a high-tech explorer who's also a walking data collecting machine.
Yeah, kinda. And that data, it's valuable for so many reasons. For scientists, they get incredible insight into the moon's environment. Geology, composition, resources.
So we're not just going there, we're really figuring it out. What about the suit's performance?
That helps us make them even better. Analyze the data on pressure, temperature, any wear and tear. That way, future suits can be even safer and more efficient.
AxiomU is like a test run for future spacesuits. What about the data on the astronauts?
That'll help us understand what long space travel does to the human body. Bone density, muscles, cardiovascular, the immune system even.
Important stuff, especially if we're thinking about going to Mars someday. So AxiomU will help future explorers.
Yes. And it gets even more interesting. That handheld device we talked about, it's not just for the suit functions. It also manages and sends the data.
Okay, how so?
Imagine them out there using those devices to get info, record stuff, take pictures, videos, all of it. and they can send it all back to Earth in real time.
No more waiting to get back to look at samples. This is incredible.
Real-time exploration. And that helps the astronauts, too. They know more, so they can make better decisions.
So Axiom U is like blurring the line between human exploration and robotics?
That's a cool way to put it. We're using tech to make humans even better, to explore more.
This is really amazing stuff. But we shouldn't forget, all of this comes from decades of research, and lessons learned from earlier missions.
Oh, absolutely. We wouldn't have Axiom U without those earlier spacesuits. Each one taught us something new.
Right. Before we get into the specifics of Axiom U, let's rewind a bit and look at how spacesuits have changed. From those first pressure suits to the ones that took us to the moon.
Sounds good to me. Get ready for a trip through spacesuit history.
Perfect. Because to really understand where we're going, you have to see where we've been. So we've gone through, the whole history of spacesuits. From those first attempts at, pressure suits to the ones that actually let us walk on the moon. It's amazing how far we've come.
Yeah, each new suit learned from the last one. With Mercury and Gemini, it was all about the fundamentals. How do we even keep someone alive in space? How do they move around?
It was all so new back then.
Totally. Then you have the Apollo suits, specifically made for the moon. Those had a whole other set of problems to solve. Extreme temperatures, those little meteoroids, that dust.
And they had to be able to move around, do experiments, all of that.
Exactly.
Those pictures, the astronauts bouncing around on the moon, those are iconic. Those suits, they were a symbol of human achievement.
Totally. And they set the stage for what we have today, on the space station. Those suits are made for zero-G, right? So they're all about being able to move freely for spacewalks and stuff.
It's so cool how each spacesuit is made for its own environment. It makes you realize how hard it is to design something for those conditions.
For sure. And then comes Axiom U. It's like the next step in spacesuit evolution. We're taking everything we've learned, adding the newest tech, even some, high fashion.
And that's what's so exciting. It's not just about the moon. It's about pushing the limits of what we thought was possible.
Right. It's about inspiring the next generation. Speaking of, what does Axiom U mean for the future of spacesuits? I think its influence will be huge.
What kind of influence?
Well, look at the data collection, the real-time analysis. That's probably going to be standard in future suits. Imagine, astronauts on Mars. Their suits are constantly collecting data, sending it back to Earth.
That would be amazing. That kind of data sharing, we couldn't have imagined it not long ago.
Right. And I also think we'll see suits become more modular. You can customize them instead of one size fits all.
So a suit for the moon would be different from one for Mars.
Exactly. That would make them more adaptable, more affordable too.
Which makes me think about space tourism. Imagine suits made for tourists, for researchers.
Imagine if going to space was hopping on a plane. The suits would have to be functional, but also comfortable.
We might have spacesuit fashion shows. Who would have thought?
The possibilities are endless. As more people go to space, we'll need even more creative spacesuit designs.
It's an amazing time, but we have to remember what you said before about learning from what's come before. How is Axiom U using those lessons?
Well, one of the biggest is redundancy, having backups. In space, even a small problem can be a disaster. Axiom U, it has multiple backups for its vital systems.
So it's all about safety, making sure the astronauts come back.
Right. And we've also learned a lot about how space affects the human body. We're using that knowledge to design better suits.
There are so many things to think about. How being in space affects your bones, your muscles.
And we're always learning more. Axiom U will give us even more data on that.
It's a medical lab on the moon. But it's not just about the tech, right? You have to make the suits comfortable for the astronauts, easy to use.
Oh, for sure. The early suits, they were so bulky, hard to move in. We've learned how to make them better, more flexible.
We've come a long way.
With Axiom U, they've really focused on that. The gloves, the visor, the controls, it's all designed to be as user-friendly as possible.
It really shows how important every detail is.
Absolutely. The engineers, the designers, they've thought of everything.
They're the unsung heroes, really. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into Axiom U, what's the main thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
Axiom U is a symbol. It shows that humans are ingenious, that we always want to explore, that we're still fascinated by space. It shows that when we put our minds together, we can do anything.
I love that. And as we go back to the moon, even to Mars, spacesuits are going to be more important than ever.
They're how we're going to explore the universe. They're going to make it possible for us to see things no one has ever seen before.
So on that note, we'll leave you with this. As spacesuits get even more advanced, what will we discover? Where will they take us?
The possibilities are endless. Until next time, keep exploring.